Welcome to this evening's presentation of Ask UAS. Ask UAS, where Ketchikan finds answers. This is a presentation and lecture series that we put on here at the University of Alaska Southeast Ketchikan Campus Library. And for today, since we're doing this by Facebook live stream, we are very, very proud to present to you a discussion called To Eat or Not to Eat, a lecture called To Eat or Not to Eat. That is the question, Southeast Alaska Wild Berries Edition. And it is hosted and given by our very own Professor Barbara Morgan. Professor Morgan is an indispensable, absolutely indispensable part of our local faculty. And she's exactly the kind of brain that you want to pick when you want to know if those berries that you're seeing when you are out hiking along the way on the trails that we have around here, or if you're the kind of person who wants to harvest berries to make pies or jams or things like that. She's a go-to person. So we pre-recorded this video yesterday, and what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and broadcast the video live stream right now, and Professor Morgan will be available by chat for the entire presentation to answer your questions live as we go along. So please go ahead and put your questions in as we go in the chat box. And then if you need a close-up picture, a little bit better quality picture of a particular berry as she's talking, please just go ahead and put that in the chat box and she will throw that up there. So without further ado, I'll turn you over to the video with Professor Morgan. And then at the end, I'll just have a little bit of information in case you want to be on our email list for getting notifications about further Ask UAS presentations, and how to follow us on Facebook. So here we go.
Thank you. I am very happy to be here. I grew up in this area and earned both of my degrees through the University of Alaska Southeast Juneau campus, and have been able to study and continue studying and answer questions about a variety of different natural world things around here. One of the questions I get a lot in the various different biology classes I've taught is, can you eat this? And through finding out answers for people, I have elaborated on the information that I learned in school and built on from my knowledge of growing up in this region. For this presentation, I am going to actually highlight the different kinds of berries we have here in Southeast Alaska, both ones that you want to be able to eat and ones that you want to be able to stay away from. Some of the ones that you want to stay away from are edible but not very desirable, and others are actually really poisonous. So I'll kind of go through all of those and answer any questions. This is a Facebook Live event, and so if you have questions, you need to put them in the comments, and then I'm going to be able to answer those as we go along in that. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and get started. My first berry is actually not actually a berry. It's called a berry though. It's Juniper Berry, Juniperus communis, and it is a plant that looks like this. The flowers are both male and female flowers. The male flowers are red and they make the pollen. Female flowers are kind of a yellowish sort of a color, more of a cone kind of a shape. And when those get pollinated, they turn into a round cone that has kind of 3 scales on it, and actually looks more like a berry, so people call them a berry. They're kind of a strange plant. The berries are fertilized and set on 1 year, but they take at least a full year, sometimes 2, to go from new green berries to ripe, dark blue, dark purple, almost black berries that are ready to harvest and eat. The plants themselves are an evergreen. They have sharp needle-like leaves. The point is really sharp. As you can see here, the underneath side of the needle or leaf is like white kind of a color. The edges of the needle leaf are kind of curled under just a little bit, and the tips are very sharp so that you know that you've found the right plant. They grow in the muskegs, kind of sprawled out over the ground, and the peat moss actually kind of starts growing up over them if they are there for very long. So you can find them in muskegs in this region. The berries are edible and actually can be a medicinal sort of a berry. So you do, of course, want to harvest only the dark purple ones after they're ripe and not the pale greenish white kind of color berries. So this is one that not many people know about in this region, so I thought I'd kind of start out with one that we don't always think of. Not only are they medicinal, the juniper berries are also a lot of European kind of cooking, in fact, uses the juniper berry to season meat, so you can use it in cooking, and it is used to flavor gin, and it is a medicinal plant. It's a fairly good decongestant, is what I understand. My next plant is one that's called clasping twisted stalk, and it's called clasping twisted stalk or Streptopus amplexifolius because the bottom of the leaf on each one of the leaves, the base of the leaf is wrapped around the stem, so it's clasping the stem. And when it blooms, the flower is on a thread-like stem that comes off at the same place at the base of the leaf, kind of arches out, and then there's like this kind of lantern-ish kind of shaped flower on the underneath side of the stem. When those ripen, they make a nice, plump, juicy berry. The skin is sort of leathery and a little bit thick. The juice is very juicy, and the seeds are kind of large. The juice is actually kind of, has a little bit of mucilaginous, so it's a little slimy. People call them cucumber berries or watermelon berries, actually more commonly, watermelon berries, and they are good to eat just straight off the bush. I don't know of anybody who cooks with them. They're kind of just one that you enjoy while you're out hiking in the forest. So this bush of the watermelon berries was very productive, which was kind of fun. They can range in color from kind of this darker red like this up to kind of a orangey golden kind of a color. And those are edible. So this is a berry, and actually I did not eat this because I was not certain of what it was. This was one of my more recent learning experiences here. It looks like the clasping twisted stalk, and it has a berry that looks like the watermelon berry, but the whole thing was like no taller than like 4 inches tall, rather than, you know, a foot and a half, 2 feet tall. Some of the other clasping twisted stalk watermelon berry plants are. I took a picture of it though and looked it up and found that indeed it is actually in the same genus as the clasping twisted stalk. Makes a berry that's similar to the watermelon berry, and it's actually called small twisted stalk. Not hugely original name there, but it's very descriptive. And the scientific name is Streptopus streptopoides. I believe these are also edible, but I did not eat it. We have what people call around here, they call it deer heart. I learned it as false lily of the valley. The scientific name is Myanthemum dilatatum, and it produces a berry that you can eat, which is something that not a lot of people know. I learned it as false lily of the valley, and then I moved to Ketchikan area and heard people talking about deer heart, and can you eat the berries off the deer heart, and can you eat the leaves off the deer heart? I'm like, what are people talking about? What's this deer heart people are talking about? And then somebody finally pointed it out, and I'm like, oh, you mean false lily of the valley? No, I mean deer heart. No, you mean false lily of the valley. And it's called false lily of the valley because the flowers do look a bit like lily of the valley, and so it's called deer heart. The leaves are heart-shaped. I don't have an entire leaf here, but the leaf is heart-shaped, and it is different from other heart-shaped leaves. Violets have a heart-shaped leaf as well, but the deer heart has a heart-shaped leaf that has veins that run all the way from the stem to the edge of the leaf, and the edge of the leaf is smooth, and the leaf itself is kind of shiny. Violets, the stem is branched. The veins are branched. The edge of the leaf is a little bit scalloped, and it's not shiny. So They are both heart-shaped, but they actually have quite a few differences between the two of them. When the berries ripen, they go from being, they first set on, they're green with very small red dots, and the red dots get bigger and bigger, spots, splotches kind of, and they kind of join then, and eventually they turn all red, and you can eat them when they're at this stage. And that happens late in the fall. You can see here that all the vegetation around here, except the moss, has died back. The stems are died back. The foliage of the deer heart has died back, but the berries are now ripe. And birds eat these, and people can eat them, but nobody really knows that, so nobody harvests them to eat them. But they're quite common in this area, and they are edible. So, also a small plant that grows around here, Cordyceps canadensis, is the miniature dogwood, and it's very striking. It's impossible to identify this when it's blooming. It has this very distinctive four-petaled white flower with a dark center to it. These are small plants that grow from like 3 to 6 inches tall, basically, and it's called miniature dogwood. And then when it sets on, it has red berries that people call bunch berries, and these are edible. And I've actually eaten them where they were a little bit sweet and they kind of tasted good, but a lot of the time, if they don't have just the right conditions of just the right warmth, just the right amount of sunlight, just the right amount of water, they don't end up actually being all that tasty. They're not a desirable berry in my estimation. The skin is fairly thick and heavy and leathery. The pulp is kind of mealy almost and white, and there are a few seeds in there. The seeds are not bad, but they're not very sweet. They are actually pretty bland. So I don't know of anybody who eats these and targets these as a berry that they cook with or eat by themselves, but they are a berry that you can use to stretch other berries. And so you can use these to extend other berries. If you don't have quite enough blueberries for a batch of jam or something, you can add some bunch berries in. Good thing is that they grow all over the place, and so you can find them. This was a nice patch here. It was a nice sunny place. They require quite a bit of sun, but not full sun. Of note also is that the plants themselves are an evergreen plant and are green almost year round. They're just now, like late April, early May, dying back, but then they'll grow back again. There's new shoots coming up already. And so they are almost always present, and they are present through the wintertime when deer need food. And so they are one of the things that deer can eat in the wintertime when there's not much else. So they are important for deer as well. We have one kind of elderberry in this area in Southeast Alaska. It's called red elderberry, Sambucus racemosa, and it blooms with this white flower. There's big kind of puffy white flowers all in bunches that grow on the bush. The leaves are pinnately compound, which means that they are kind of divided into leaflets that are paired up across from each other along the length of the leaf stem. And then the flowers are white. They smell like vanilla. They produce a lot of pollen, so if you're allergic, you don't want to like smell them really heavy. They turn into, when they're pollinated, they turn into little red berries, clusters of red berries like this. Bears love these and will target them. They'll break down the bushes, in fact, to be able to get to them and eat them in the fall. These are edible, but you kind of want to be careful with these because the seeds have cyanide in them. So you don't want to eat very many, or better yet, you can cook them and strain them and get the pulp out and leave the seeds behind and use just the pulp in order to cook with. So I just kind of leave them alone because I don't really want to deal with something that has cyanide in them, but you can eat them and you can make jelly out of them, which is quite tasty if you get rid of the seeds first. So that's something to consider there. I've had a lot of questions. It's pretty well known that the black elderberry is medicinal. You can buy preparations, sambucol and whatnot in stores. A tincture of the purple or blue or black, whatever elderberry, and that's a healthy thing. People want to know if you have the same health benefits from the red elderberry, and I don't know, actually. I've read mixed reports. Some people say yes, some sources say no. They're in the same genus, so they're closely related. It seems plausible to me that they would, but I can't give anybody a straight answer on that. I don't have any concrete information. If anybody finds a good answer, I would be interested to hear it. So this is Viburnum trilobum, which is the high bush cranberry. We have quite a bit of this in patches. There's some around Ward Lake in the Ketchikan area. I've also found it on the edges of muskegs. It likes quite a bit of water. The leaves are kind of, have 3 lobes, which is why it has that in its scientific name, trilobum, 3 lobes. They kind of look like dinosaur footprints to me. The flowers are white, clusters of white flowers, and those turn into red berries. And when they're ripe, they are soft and squishy. People think, oh, they're soft and squishy, they're not good anymore. They actually taste best after you let them get soft and squishy, which usually doesn't happen until after the first frost. And when you pick them, you need to be kind of gentle then, because it's basically a skin full of juice with one big seed in the middle. And so you pick them though and juice them and use that juice, and you can either drink the juice straight. It's pretty strong tasting. You could dilute it with water or other juice if you want to, or make it into jelly. It makes a really nice jelly. And you can also cook it down and turn it into a delightful ketchup, kind of a sauce sort of a thing going on there. High in vitamin C and other phytonutrients, really quite healthy. They taste kind of, there's kind of a musky taste to them, and they're quite astringent, and so not everybody likes them. They fall into the category of berries that some people really love them, and others really don't love them. And so try them out, see if you like them or not. They are called high bush cranberries. They are on bushes that can be, 8 or 10 feet tall, but they are not actually cranberries. Viburnum trilobum, they are not in the same genus as cranberries, and so they're not cranberries, but they are edible, and they're quite tasty. So this is a picture looking down on a kind of a plant called creeping red raspberry, Rubus pedantus. And this is the first one in a whole series of berries here that are all in the genus Rubus, which some of them are going to be familiar to people and some of them are not. This is the first one here. These plants really grow only maybe 4 or so inches tall, and the leaf is divided into 5 kind of parts to it, five leaves kind of. So another name for it is 5-finger bramble, creeping red raspberry. These leaves kind of come up, people look at them as separate plants, but they're actually on a long runner that goes along underneath the moss, right above in the soil basically, with the leaves coming up every so often. The flowers also come up at the same point as the leaf. That's why they're called creeping, is that runner kind of creeps along and sends up another leaf, and another leaf, etc. If you see them, if that runner has gone off the edge of the embankment or the log or something, you'll see the long runner with lots of the leaves off of it. So it will put up one white flower with each of the leaves there, and that one white flower will turn into one red berry. And they do not do this every year. This last summer when we had, in this region, it was quite dry for us, so we were in a drought. We still had 100 or so inches of rain, but we were in a drought for here, so it was a lot warmer and drier than normal, and these were able to set on us. I actually, for the last 2 summers, with our warm, dry summers, we had enough heat to be able to have these set on pretty well. This picture shows the five fingers, basically, of the leaf pattern here. So these, I've not ever found enough of them to harvest and eat them, like in jam or something. I just, but out hiking or something, you can eat them. They are in the same genus as salmon berries, and so the berry here is actually composed of anywhere between 2 and like 6 or 7 maybe little kind of drupelets, the same as the salmon berries are, only salmon berries have lots of them. So creeping red raspberry, and also in the same genus, Rubus arcticus, is the nagoon berry. And this picture here shows you, this looks like it's actually related to salmon berries. They have the same pink flower, actually very similar, and the same shape of leaf. But instead of being a big shrub like salmon berries can be, it is also a small plant, low to the ground. Not a lot of these in Southeast, and there's some up by Juneau. They're kind of actually more along the mainland part of Southeast is where you'll find little patches of them. And then when those berries set on and then ripen, they are again kind of like a salmon berry, several drupelets. More of them together though than you find in the creeping red raspberry. Leaves kind of similar to the creeping red raspberry as well. Little different looking, but similar enough you can see that they are related. Rubus chemomeris is the cloudberry, and these are these grow in the muskegs in this area. Muskegs being the peat bogs that we have, and they come up, and before the leaf is even open, sometimes, most of the time, you'll get this big white flower, one big white flower. Looks a lot like the Thimble Berry flower, and there's a reason for that we'll get to in a minute. That one white flower will turn into a cluster of fairly big drupelets that are kind of pale yellow, and then they mature into kind of a pale orange, like dark yellow, pale orange kind of a berry, called the Cloudberry. And last year, with all of the heat and the dry we had, hot and dry for us, was the best year I'd seen for the cloudberries as well. And some people really love these. These are the ones, these actually fall into that category for me. Some people really love the cloudberries, and I've eaten them. They're not very sweet, and they have no acidity to speak of, and so they just taste kind of bland and slightly musky sort of a taste to me, which I'm not super in favor of. But some people really love them, and were really excited to be able to find a good batch of them last year. So still in the same genus, Rubus spectabilis is the salmonberry. See these big pink blossoms here? These are bushes, shrubs, kind of, and they can get, I've seen them maybe, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 feet tall. And the stems have thorns, kind of a papery outer bark with thorns on them, so you have to be a little bit careful. They're one of the first pops of color in the springtime. Not the very first, but one of the first. And so it's kind of a sign of a little bit advanced springtime, which is a nice thing to see. Those set on and then ripen into salmon berries, which you can see the drupelets here, kind of the individual little pieces of the berry. And salmon berries can be red, dark red even, like almost purpley dark red, or kind of a lighter yellow, and then I've seen them kind of orange in between. There's a full range of color between yellow and dark red, basically. All of them are still salmon berries. All of them belong to the same species, Rubus spectabilis. And the leaves kind of have this 3-part kind of arrangement here. You can see 1, 2, 3. Like many of the ones in this genus do. Not all of them, but some of them do. These are highly desirable by most people. Some people think that they have too big of seeds. They are a little seedy, which for me means I eat them fresh. That's my favorite way of eating them. When you cook them, the seeds get a little bit harder, and then they're not quite as desirable to me, but they're still tasty. You can bake with them like pie, make jam, jelly. My favorite way is straight off the bush though. Me and the bears. And the last one in this genus is Rubus parviflorus, is the Thimble Berry. And remember back talking about the Cloudberry, I said it had a big white flower. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's very similar. You could see the similarity between the Cloudberry flower and the Thimble Berry flower. They actually look very much the same. But the Thimble Berry is a big bush, again, like 6, 8, 10 feet tall. It has these big leaves that are, I've seen them a foot or so across. And the leaf is kind of velvety. The stem has a bit of hair on it even. And the berries even have these little teeny hairs on each druplet, so they are kind of velvety in feel too. And when the berry ripens, they are shaped a lot like a thimble. You can balance them on your fingers. They're soft. They mold very easily. They need the perfect balance of enough sun to ripen them and enough water that they're juicy, but not so much water that the berries are wet for any length of time, because then they'll just mold, and then that's a disaster. Because thimbleberries are delicious. They are really a wonderful berry. They are quite tart, really flavorful. They're sweet, but not overly sweet. Wonderful straight off the bush. My favorite use of them is to make them into jam. You can make them into a pie. If you use only thimbleberries in a pie, that can be pretty tart. So mixing them with other berries is good. And these are fairly common, but they're not like all over the place. Fairly common. If you find a good patch, people don't necessarily share with you where their good patch is, because they want those berries themselves. So, yeah, this is one of our wonderful berries here. So that is several berries all in the same genus, Rubus. And then we have a couple more here. So this is the beach strawberry, Fragaria chiloensis, and we do have one wild strawberry in this area. And you mostly see these kind of high up on the beach, actually, just above the intertidal area. And kind of in sandy kind of areas quite a bit. And they are a strawberry. People, hey, I saw some wild strawberries, or I saw some strawberries that got away from people's gardens. And they make a nice little strawberry. They are small, like the end of your finger kind of is small. They don't always turn bright red when they're ripe, but they are flavor packed. They have as much flavor to them as any big strawberry you buy in a store, but it's concentrated into a small amount and quite sweet. So if you find a good patch of these, that is worth picking and maintaining and keeping them up, and having a nice patch of strawberries in the area. Okay, this is also one that you find in the muskegs. It's called Crowberry, Impetrum nigrum, and the plants themselves they range, I've seen them from like 4 up to maybe 9 or 10 inches tall, sometimes, usually about 6 or so inches tall. They look like little evergreen trees. They have the same kind of needles as evergreen trees, erect though, needles kind of pointing up. As you can see, there's several flowers that will come up on stalks, kind of. And then, so further north in the interior of Alaska, these grow on the tundra. In southeast Alaska, you find them in muskegs. And then when they set on, they're called crowberries because they're black when they're ripe. And they have one little dimple on the end, opposite of where it's attached to the plant. And they're quite good, actually. You want to pick them. It's kind of hard. They visually don't look any different between when they're ripe and ready to pick and when they are overripe and dried up and not very good anymore. They still look kind of black and shiny. If you get them when they're overripe and kind of dried up and past their prime, they're not all that tasty. If you pick them when they're ripe, they're firm. They have a kind of a crunch like an apple does. Thin skin and small seeds, and the pulp is still pretty kind of firm and has a crunch kind of like an apple. So I have never picked a lot of these I've never picked very many of them. I didn't really think that you could eat them, but again, this was a question, and I've, doing research and preparing for class and whatnot, have found that these are edible. I've tried them when they were past the ripe, didn't like them and thought, I don't know why people eat these. But then last summer I ate some that were just at the right stage of ripeness and recognized that I liked them. And so this next summer, late summer, I'm going to try to find enough to be able to pick. They're prolific. You can find patches of them that you can pick a lot of them. So I'm going to try them out. I'm going to try cooking with them, see what happens there. So crowberries in muskegs, little plants, blackberry, white pulp inside. Salal is quite common in this area. The scientific name is Gaultheria Chelan. The leaves are shaped a lot like, kind of a typical leaf shape, I guess you could say. Come to a sharp point, slightly serrated. They're kind of thick and shiny and are evergreens. They are always green as long as the plant is healthy. And then you get these pink blossoms on kind of several blossoms on each stem. The stem and the flower are kind of sticky, and when those then are pollinated and they ripen, they turn into these kind of real dark blue, purple, almost black berry when they're ripe. And again, several of them, sprays of them on the same stem. They're delicious. But some people don't like them. So they're, again, that category. Some people love them, some people hate them. And they're kind of a firmer, kind of fleshy sort of a texture to them. The outside's a little bit sticky. They are sweet and kind of earthy flavored, not a lot of acidity to them. Some people like them better than blueberries in like a pie. Make great jam. You can dry them and then use them. You can turn them into fruit leather and use them. One of the great things about them, there's kind of been a lot of focus, people eating healthy and wanting to know what they can eat that's healthy. They're so focused on antioxidants and phytonutrients, and which plants or berries have high levels of antioxidants and phytonutrients. And salal berries are very high. They are higher than blueberries in a lot of the antioxidants and phytonutrients. So salal are one of the healthiest berries you can eat, which is great. They taste great and they're good for you. You can't ask for more than that. So the best way to harvest them is actually to take the whole stem that has several berries on it when you're out picking berries, and then at home is to, if you just try to pick them, that just the skin comes off and the inside part stays on the stem. So it's kind of difficult to pick them in the field. So if you pick the whole stem of them and bring them home and like cut them off with scissors or pinch them off with your fingernails or something, that's a little easier. Okay, so this is one. Ribes bracteosum is the stink currant or blue currant. They're called stink currant because all parts of the whole plant and the berry to some extent have kind of a real musky sort of a smell to them. Again, some people really love these berries, some people not. The flower is like this. The flowers are all on these long kind of skeins of flowers, little teeny pink kind of flowers along here. That one's not, that one's a salmon berry. These are all, though, these long skeins of the flowers on the blue currant. And then they turn into a blue currant that is actually covered in wild yeast, and so it's white from that, but if you brush that off, the skin is actually a dark purple, and some of them don't have as much of the yeast, and so they look darker purple. They also have the dried up flower on the end of the berry, which is kind of helps you understand what's going on there. The leaves of the plant are big. They look quite a bit like, they're the same size as like the Thimble Berry leaves, but kind of this jagged edge, kind of more like, I don't know, it's kind of, it looks like a cross between a salmonberry leaf and a thimbleberry leaf, actually. The real way that you can tell for sure that it is the stink currant, though, is that if you break it, it has that very pungent smell to it. So these are great straight off the bush, or made into jam. Apparently some people make them into wine as well, and I think that they're fairly high in phytonutrients, but not as much as salal is. Okay, so now we're into the other genus that has several different berries in the same genus that are closely related to each other. And that is the Vaccinium genus. And the first one we're going to talk about is Vaccinium Portfolium, which is the red huckleberry. The berry is red. The blossom is not usually at all red. It's usually like yellow-green, maybe a slight blush of pink on it. So it's hard to tell if they're actually blossoming until you get close and start examining the plant. These are all in the heather family too. The leaves are oval, and they grow actually in the forest underneath the trees quite well. They kind of like it underneath there. And then when the berry is ripe, they are this bright red berry. This is one of the preferred berries in this region. It's the red huckleberry, and they are tart, really juicy, bright flavor to them. They make good pie, jam, jelly, muffins, scones. You can use them everywhere. All different kinds. Very high in vitamin C. Same genus are the Vaccinium ovalifolium. And that is what a lot of people call like the dusty blueberries. They are blueberry, but they have some of that wild yeast on the outside of it, and so it looks kind of dusty sort of a look. And the flowers are often kind of this paler pink kind of a color. All of the flowers on the Vaccinium berries are this kind of lantern-shaped, the petals are fused into this kind of lantern shape with one opening in the bottom of the flower there. Often that opening has a little bit of a ruffle kind of around it. So you can see hummingbirds kind of going along and taking sips of the nectar out of them. So here's the blueberry, here the dusty blueberry, and quite often the branches of this kind of blueberry are reddish kind of a color. The berries are sweet, a little bit tart, quite flavorful, preferred by a lot of people. Again, jam, pie, muffins, scones. Blueberries are wonderful. Healthy for you. Vaccinium alaskense is the Alaska or blue huckleberry, people call them. Has a darker pink flower. And then when it's ripe, it's kind of shiny, and can be blue or real dark blue, almost black even. And they are very flavorful, sometimes pretty darn acidic though, and not always that sweet. But they're wonderful to cook with. And we have bog blueberries, which are a smaller plant, grow in like the muskeg areas. Mostly. The leaves are kind of blunt on the end and kind of widen out. Actually, they're wider and blunt on the end that's not attached to the plant. And the berry is kind of oval almost sometimes. It has a really mild flavor, not very acidic, pretty sweet, and it's pretty good. I've never seen like big patches of them where you can harvest a lot of berries though, but the Vaccinium uliginosum, or the bog blueberry, is pretty tasty too. And then Vaccinium caspitosum, or the dwarf blueberry, also called bilberries, have kind of a darker pink flower. The edge of the leaf on these guys is a little bit serrated. They're a smaller plant, can even be kind of sprawling on the ground a little bit. You'll find this sometimes in muskegs and in subalpine to just barely up into alpine a little bit, kind of an area. And berries kind of this medium kind of blue, and these are the best blueberries in my book. Very tasty. So they have a lot of good blueberry flavor, nice balance of sweet and tart, and yeah, so those are definitely worth harvesting and picking. The dwarf blueberry, Vaccinium caspitosum. So there's more blueberries than people always recognize in this area, so that's kind of fun. Also in the same genus are two berries that are cranberries. We have two different kinds of cranberries here. There's Vaccinium oxycocos, which is the bog cranberry, and that is kind of this long stem with really narrow leaves on it that almost look needle-like, and when it blooms it has these pink flowers that have the petals kind of inverted or swept back so that all of the anthers and etc. are exposed. Then when they make berries, the plant is, these are some of the plant stems here with the leaves. They're not strong enough to hold up the berry is huge compared to how big the plant is, and so the berries are laying on the ground. And sometimes actually down in the peat moss some. These are, the bog cranberries grow in the muskegs. And so when you pick them, you have to get down on the ground or like kill your back. So they're laying on the ground on a thread-like stem that's attached to the top of this small kind of sparse-looking plant that's not very obvious actually. I've seen them in like 4 to like maybe 8 inches long, just laying on the ground there. Delicious, has great cranberry flavor. You can eat them straight, fresh. They're a little bit tart to do a whole lot of them that way, but they make a really great sauce, just like you would make cranberry sauce. Put them into muffins, scones, or whatever kind of you can bake with them. Vaccinium vitis ideae is the lobish cranberry, also known as the lingonberry, and that is a kind of a small plant, but it is actually, the stem is substantial enough to hold the plant up for the most part. Sometimes you kind of find them a little bit sprawled, but not as much. These grow kind of on the edges of muskegs or up kind of on hummocky raised areas in muskegs so that they're not as affected by the peat moss actually. They don't like how acidic the peat moss makes the water where the peat moss is. So they'll be on the edges of the muskegs or up on the hummocky areas. They bloom with this kind of delicate pink flower. It has kind of the same shape as the blueberry blossom, a little bit longer, but basically that same kind of lantern sort of a shape. And then the berry, this is kind of a big view of the plant. Here the stem kind of coming up, cluster of berries at the top here, all attached to the same plant, and those are bright red when they're ready to eat. Some people I know like having the lingonberries or lobish cranberries separate from the bog cranberries. When they pick, they keep them separate because they think that the taste is way different. I don't know. Anyway, I just put them all together. And I actually end up mostly finding a lot more bog cranberries than the lowbush cranberries. So used the same way, actually, as lowbush cranberries. Lingonberries are famous, like in Swedish cuisine, right? And so, yeah, you can use them as a lingonberry. They are a lingonberry. Now we get to the section called poisonous berries. And these are the ones that you don't want to eat. Some of them are like only slightly poisonous or toxic, and some of them are like deadly. So, first one, Oplopenax horridus, which is the devil's club. And the inner bark of the devil's club is a strong medicinal. The berry is toxic. Don't eat that. Bears eat it, but just because a bear can eat something doesn't mean that humans can. Different tolerances. So it starts out, the most everybody knows what devil's club is, but the stem is got a papery bark. On the outer bark is papery thin with a lot of thorns on it. And you can see a few of the thorns here on the branches that are supporting leaves. The leaves are big and kind of held out horizontally, tabletop kind of fashion. And then in the center of all the leaves, the top of the stem will be one big cluster of white flowers. And then when those develop into berries, they are one big cluster of red berries, kind of an inverted cone shape of these red berries. Really eye-catching, really distinctive kind of a plant. And like I said, the inner bark of the stem can be used medicinally, but the berries are something that you want to stay away from. Bears eat them though. The twinberry honeysuckle is one that is not super common in Southeast Alaska. On some of the outer islands in southern Southeast Alaska is the only place I really know of where you can find this. Lonicera involucrata, the twinberry honeysuckle, and all twin. There is a honeysuckle. Flowers are in pairs. Flowers range in color from yellow to orangish kind of, and then those develop into twin berries. Dark purple, black kind of berry, and this red kind of it's sepals of the flower. Black twinberry. And this one is one that has mixed reports that it might be just the seeds that are toxic, but the juice is okay, or maybe the whole thing is toxic. I'm putting it into the section of things that you shouldn't eat. And if you really think that you want to eat this, I would highly recommend doing your research really well to find out if any of it is edible or not. And so I'm thinking not. We have baneberry in this area, and this is one of the ones that's really toxic. You should not mess with baneberry. Actiae rubra, the plant is, this is one that people can, oh my gosh, red huckleberries are red, and baneberries can be red. How can you tell the difference? And the plants are like widely different. Baneberry is a kind of a plant and not a small shrub. And so it has some basal leaves that are like right at the ground level kind of, and then stem that comes up, and there can be a few leaves on the stem, but not usually a lot of leaves. A flower stalk that comes up, and the flowers are these kind of puffy white things that develop into very shiny berries that can be red, they can be white. If either way, red or white, they have a dark spot on the end of the berry that is not attached to the plant, and they are attached to the main stem with their own little stem. Each berry has its own little stem that attaches it to the main stem, which is kind of unusual too. So baneberries are shiny, they're either red or white, they have the dark spot on the end, and they have their own little stem that joins them to the main stem. And the whole thing is a plant and not a shrub. Poisonous. Don't eat these. We have a lot of these in the Ketchikan area on some of our paths. Clintonia uniflora, and it's called the Queen's Cup Lily. They are beautiful. The plant comes up. There's 2 really long leaves to each plant. Occasionally 3, but usually only 2 really long leaves. 1 really beautiful little white flower that opens up. It's really gorgeous. And then that flower ripens, turns into a berry, and you end up with these 1 single berry in each of the plants that is this bright blue, like crayon blue. Like that's not natural colored. I don't know why anybody would think that you should eat it. They're called blue bead berries as well. These are plants that are like low-lying on the ground. You can see the moss here around them. Some of the paths or trails around here have these on the edges of the path, and these are deadly too. You should not eat the Queen's Cup Lily or the blue bead berries. Deadly. Not edible. And that's it. So thank you very much for coming and hanging out with me today, and we'll see you at the next UAS Ketchikan presentation. And we'll leave.
All right, so thank you everybody for joining us for this presentation of Ask UAS. And this is our last scheduled presentation for the spring semester. We're already starting to line up some exciting presenters and topics for the coming fall semester, so keep your eye available on that. And if you want to get updates on our presentations, first of all, make sure that you follow us on Facebook if you're a Facebook member. It's facebook.com/Ketchikan Campus Library. And also get on our email list. So our email list is ketchikan.library@alaska.edu. That's ketchikan.library@alaska.edu. And you'll get email updates when we're going to have a presentation. And we always have lots of good information that comes out on our Facebook page, especially about Ask UAS. And so, and also, just so that you're aware, we've been actively putting our prior Ask UAS presentations up on YouTube, and you can get more information on that, both on our Facebook page, but also on our webpage. So you can just Google us, and you'll find we have on our library website an Ask UAS page with links through to YouTube, or else when you are on YouTube, you can simply Google Ask UAS Ketchikan, and you'll find a really long set of playlists. So we've got quite a few videos up there for you. Hope you enjoy this presentation. Thank you for joining us.